Hi everyone. I had a lot of fun with my Alien Covenant commentary track yesterday that I did, so I thought I'd try my hand at it again with another film, The Terminator. All you have to do to participate is push play for the theatrical cut of The Terminator when I tell you to, and you can listen along as I comment on the film. Without further ado, here we go. Starting at 0, I'm pushing play now. Alright, here we go. About 10 seconds in here with the Orion picture release. I'm not too familiar with them. I remember them from, of course, The Terminator, but I'm not sure if... I don't even think they handled the second film. When this movie was originally made, as far as I understand it, it had a $4.5 million budget, fairly shoestring. Even by the standards of 1979 with Alien, for instance, that was about half of that film's budget, and that film was fairly low budget. I'm a huge fan of this set. Of course, you have the hunter-killer floating through the sky here, but it's model effects. Just everything about it works really well, considering how cheap it is. It's so iconic, too, having the hunter-killers roll over the pile of skulls, and you have Brad Feidel's score here. It's very dark, very bleak, very ominous. And you don't have something triumphant like the second film. You have nothing but skulls, darkness, fire. And then, of course, this explanation here, the machines arose from the ashes of the nuclear fire. Tonight. It's very bleak. There's nothing triumphant about what we just saw, and it's merely a taste of things to come. I love this opening too. It's very minimalistic. It's not like the second film where they have the playground that's set on fire. Here you just have the scrolling text, and you can't even really see what the letters are until the very end once they align themselves and they pull out. I like the way the actors' names sort of appear according to, say, like a console with a white square that sort of types it out for us. It's very, very much akin to that period. Computers would have been fairly new. I've heard of people watching Terminator back in the day and not actually being very familiar with computers. And when they saw them, they mistook the various members, the humans and the machines, as various tribes warring with one another. They weren't actually able to say that they were machines in the sense that they were made by, say, computers. Of course, the music here is really excellent. This version of the score by Brad Feidel actually has an additional 8th note. As far as I understand it, it's 13 8th notes as opposed to 12/8 as it was in the second film. It gives it a slightly asymmetrical time signature here. I kind of prefer the original myself. It's a little bit more interesting musically. It's also the original theme. As far as I understand it, this was actually James Cameron's second film. He worked, of course, on Piranha 2. He wasn't able to finish the film as the producer took over, but this was his first film that he finished as a director. You could call it his directorial debut. And of course, you automatically have smoke and fog, very similar to, say, Ridley Scott. Of course, James Cameron would go on to pay homage to Scott with Aliens, but you can already see that the photography between the two directors is fairly similar. Of course, Adam Greenberg did the night photography for this film. He would go on to do the night photography, or direct the photography for Catherine Bigelow's film Near Dark. Catherine Bigelow and James Cameron would be married for a short period of time. She would go on to beat him in the Academy Awards. She did The Hurt Locker and he did Avatar, and she would beat him for Best Picture. Adam Greenberg also did the night photography for, or he was the director of photography for Terminator 2. And if I'm not mistaken, he was nominated for an Academy Award for that film. Regardless, the visuals here are really good. Of course, the special effects, they didn't have the budget to sort of animate everything completely on screen. So when the time displacement occurs in this film, it occurs largely off screen. You don't see the sphere of light appear directly on screen. You just see the lightning. Everything occurs sort of peripherally. You have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, as far as I understand it, was in his early 30s, late 20s, early 30s when he did this film. Sort of a tropish kind of establishing shot here where the nude Schwarzenegger gazes out at this nightscape of LA. Here we have the late, great Bill Paxton. One of his first roles, I think one of his earlier roles that I can think of is Shadows of the Night by Pat Benatar. He was a Nazi in the music video. But apart from that, I can't think of too many films early on in his career that I can remember. Probably his most prominent role that I can remember immediately is, of course, Hudson in Aliens. The dialogue here is a little bit interesting. The Terminator has a tendency to sort of repeat what they're saying, almost as though he's processing their language. But then, of course, he very quickly catches on and begins issuing imperatives, telling them to hand over their belongings. Remember, Rob Ager was analyzing this scene and said that this is to demonstrate the weakness of the Terminator, that he is injured, and thus not perfect. He is able to be injured by these thugs and their knives. But what he failed to sort of mention or point out is that it's actually a cosmetic injury. He took what normally would be a fatal wound or a devastating blow to the abdomen with a switchblade and was able to shrug it off, whereas he was able to pull out the heart of the individual who wounded him, ostensibly. If you look closely here, when the lightning sort of kicks up, you can see a sphere, but only for a brief moment. If the budget had been higher, I imagine they would have actually attempted to sort of demonstrate that visually, like they did with Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. It's very peripheral. The actor here was a stunt actor. Michael Bain said he'd never seen anything quite like it, where they literally drop the man from a certain height and he lands hard on the concrete with no sort of way to cushion him. It's very hardcore, very low budget. He said it was the most impressive and painful stunt that he's ever seen working in the business. And he's been in film for quite a long time. Michael Bain, as far as I understand it, was 27 when this film was made. Fairly young. I love the makeup effects too. You can see on his back scars from his wars in the future. His skin is dirty. Again, this whole film is very grimy, very bleak. He doesn't look like the actor that they had in Terminator Genesis who played Kyle Reese, who's perfectly clean and muscular. He's wounded, he's haggard. And I just wanted to comment that Genesis wasn't the worst film in the world, but the parts of the film that I really enjoyed the most were those that sort of paid homage to this film. And again, everything about it, the lighting style, the flashlights are very, very harsh. The lighting overhead is very harsh. There's a lot of smoke. And it has a tendency to kind of almost obscure things, are very, very harsh looking and hidden. Of course, even when Kyle Reese disappears into the alley, you can see him highlighted by the light coming from within the alley. And this officer here is almost hidden by his own flashlight. It's so powerful. This happens a lot throughout this film. Of course, the version of the film that I'm watching has a stereo sound mix, whereas the original version of the film, to save money, they did the audio of the film and the sound in mono. And it has a certain kind of quality to it. The outdated look of the computers, it's very typical of that time period, though they may seem anachronistic by today's standards. The mono soundtrack, I think, had a certain kind of powerful effect to kind of reinforce that aesthetic. I love this shot too, where you have the dolly shot where Kyle Reese is crawling and the camera's following him. And then, of course, you have cross-cutting between him and the police, and he's sort of darting along across the ground, crawling very quickly while holding onto the pistol. And, of course, he's occasionally obscured by the articles of clothing as he moves through the aisles. I really love that shot. And then it zooms away from the police officer in the background to Kyle Reese grabbing a coat off the rack. And again, you can see the scars on his back, the dirt. As far as I understand it, he never has a point or an opportunity in this film to take a shower. He was able to shave before he went back in time, however. A little bit of product placement here with Nike. I have to wonder how he was able to move throughout the this mall or shopping center without being heard, running up the stairs wearing shoes. And yet this police officer who looks up through there is unable to hear him. But again, it's a writing device, and we just have to assume that he's given a light step, given that he has had to evade more deadly killers than these police officers in the future. Of course, I have to wonder if in this day and age he would be able... This movie has a lot of instances where he steals from the police or steals cars, and they don't have modern safety measures. The shotgun wouldn't be locked into place. It's just in the car. He walks in and steals it, wearing a trench coat. I remember when The Matrix was released, and you had the Columbine shootings, where the Columbine shooters, wore trench coats into the school with firearms. They made a fairly big deal about that. But of course, you have Reese in 1984 is doing the same thing, and I have to wonder if they had a similar issue. Of course, it was a fairly low-budget film. It didn't have nearly the same level of exposure, I don't think. I have to wonder if certain people complained about the violence in the same way that they would have, say, 10 years later. I don't think so, though. It's just, again, it was the 1980s. There was no internet. A very different time period. Again, he's looking through a phone book. And we cut to Sarah Connor on her moped here. A lot of people like to make fun of her hair, but again, this was the period. It was very popular. I like watching this film. You look at all the cars, and they look retro by today's standards, but back in those days, that would have been par for the course. Looks like you have a muscle car in the background there. And this is essentially the point in the film where we find this character who's the hero. She's the central protagonist, and she's put into a situation where it's kind of the pits. She doesn't like her job. And it's very common to have characters like that where they're put into a situation where they're not happy. I love the editing too. It's very quick. Like, who is this person? And then it cuts to the time card and we see her name. Back when they had time cards that you would actually punch in and punch out from a job, they don't do that anymore. So again, that's another thing that kind of dates this film. Station wagons, yet another thing. As far as I understand it, this scene was actually shot without them having a license. At the time, they didn't have a license to shoot here, but they shot it very quickly. How to steal a car if you're a Terminator. There's about 3 or 4 different ways that they steal cars in this film. Not an easy job being a waiter or a waitress, though, and I can relate being a waiter at one point in my life myself. Big Boy in Chelsea, Michigan, and my twin brother and I were waiters there, and it's not an easy line of work. You got to constantly have a smile on your face. So I think this really captures that. You know, it's a very real kind of scene. He sort of stares at her incredulously when she asks him that question. A little bit of foreshadowing or irony here. She's right. Who will kill her in 100 years after everyone's been nuked into oblivion? Of course, in this day and age, I don't know if it was technically legal for them to be able to sell automatic weapons over the counter. As far as I understand it, in the film, he actually sort of illegally modifies the Uzi that he buys for it to shoot automatic. This guy behind the counter, I don't know the actor's name. He's a character actor. You see him in a lot of films. The Burbs by Joe Dante. He also was in The Howling when he talks about werewolves. Gremlins. Very popular in this period of cinema. You see him in a lot of films like this, a lot of horror films. Usually with small roles. He doesn't always live to the end. And in this case, he doesn't. But again, the safety regulations for firearms, I'm not entirely sure if they were 100% accurate. Because again, there's a 15-day wait on the handguns, but he can take the rifles right now. So he just shoots the guy and takes everything. But then, of course, you have a bit of cross-cutting because you have Kyle Reese preparing for battle in the same fashion. This movie does that a lot. You know, there's a parallel between Kyle Reese and the Terminator. And, of course, in the original film, it's a little bit more obvious who is the villain, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Kyle Reese doesn't shoot anyone, doesn't kill anyone. He shows the cop mercy after he takes his weapon. Whereas Arnold Schwarzenegger is much less forgiving. In the second film, however, they tried to make it a little bit more ambiguous who the villain was. A character actor here. Hey man, you got a serious attitude problem. And again, that kind of sound effect, they easily had a cut to him sort of glowering at the Terminator, but instead they just have his audio off screen. And again, it's a way to sort of expedite things, move them along. Instead of having that additional shot, they just put the sound effect in the background. Foreshadowing here, the semi, eventually there's a chase scene later in the film with the semi-truck. Again, shots like these, as far as I understand it, some of them they actually didn't have a license. They just had to very quickly move in, get the footage that they wanted, and move back out. Though again, with this part where he's firing off his pistol, I can't imagine they would have been able to do that without attracting the attention of law enforcement, so perhaps that particular shot they were able to do more legally, less clandestinely. I don't know the name of this actress. Again, the use of so many actors and actresses in this film that only appear on screen for one moment. I've never seen this woman in any other film. And it adds to the realism of the, again, that guy in the background, these extras, Sarah's co-worker, the people in the break room here. It adds a feeling of realism because, again, it doesn't feel quite like a film. Again, that woman who says shh with her feet up. She's not wearing any shoes. You have props on the desk because they all sit around watching the TV. And it's LA, so you have some Hispanic actors as well. It feels very real. You don't feel like you're watching a Hollywood film quite as much because, again, you don't have a lot of big faces. And all of the people really starring in this were sort of no-names. Arnold Schwarzenegger was probably the biggest star, but the only other film that he had been in was Conan the Barbarian. And again, we see another way to steal a car. Hot wiring this time. This is the second way to steal a car. Of course, the way that cars are made nowadays, again, this only dates the movie further, is I don't think these methods would work on new cars. I'm not a car thief, so I don't know if that's true or not. And again, you have another example of this really harsh, obfuscating lighting to the point that and again, I love this cut where you have this transition. You see 1984, the treads of this device, and then you see the treads of the hunter-killer, but you don't know until it sort of, the camera moves down and you see the skulls. And then the music kicks in by Brad Fiedel. I love this sequence. And you have the, again, this movie has a Hispanic cast. You have a Latino girl who is fighting in future LA alongside Sergeant Reese here. I love the costumes. And again, everything is so dirty and so bleak. And it's low budget, but given how dark everything is and how much smoke and lighting there is, you don't really have to have things look like $1 million because, again, the smoke, the harsh lighting, the shadows, everything sort of hides the fact that what you're looking at is lower budget. Again, that's a hunter-killer, but all they really have to do is add sound effects and shine a bright light in the screen. They don't really have to have much animation. You can barely see the hunter-killer. It's hidden by the smoke of the night sky. But at the same time, there are enough shots of this female soldier fighting alongside Kyle Reese. You can see that she's a beautiful woman. She's also, as far as I understand, uncredited. She's the nameless soldier, so to speak. And to this day, I don't know who the actress is who plays her, which again is a testament to the type of actors and actresses that they were employing with this film are largely unknown. And to this day, I don't know who that actress is, if she was in anything else. And it's, again, as he turns away, you can see blood on his face, and it's illustrating the cold, remorseless quality of the machines that they're fighting, where you have this beautiful woman who is sort of extinguished, smashed out of existence from the fire from the hunter-killer's weaponry. It blows her apart. It's a little bit more brutal than, say, the war sequences in the second film, because the machines blow people apart. This person up here is crushed as the car is knocked over, and it's very, very brutal, but it's very fast. Accented only by Brad Feidel's score and the sound of combat. Everything is, of course, obscured again by smoke and fire. There's also a dreamlike quality. You have to wonder, is Kyle Reese having a dream or a flashback, a nightmare? But then suddenly he wakes up, and he pumps that shotgun a lot in this film. You can see a scar below his lower lip as well. Extreme close-up of him turning off the radio. Again, vintage radio. You can hear, of course, them advertising what would have been top-of-the-line technology. I believe Laserdisc, or maybe it was CDs. Maybe a bit of product placement with General Bank. I don't know if that's an actual branch or not. And you have Ginger, her first appearance on screen. I kind of like how their chords are sort of tangled up. And her gimmick in this film is that she's constantly listening to her Walkman, which, again, product placement. You have tampons or Tampax in the background. It feels like a real apartment. You know, it's very cluttered. Looks kind of like my first apartment. Slightly more vintage, however. And you have a bit of sort of foreshadowing to the stalking theme that occurs later in the film, where you have her picking up the phone, and Ginger's boyfriend, Matt, is talking to her, not realizing that it's her, and it makes her a little bit uncomfortable initially. And she realizes, of course, that she's having a little bit of fun with him. She realizes that she's not in danger at this point. Of course, it gets much more serious later in the film. And chagrined, of course, Matt says, "Oh, shit, Sarah?" He doesn't... He has to think about it for a second. He's not able to recall her name instantly. She's just the roommate of his squeeze. Very 80s, though. Notice I love that cut, too, having the guy's face pressed up against the window. And very calmly, Lieutenant Traxler, played by Paul Winfield. Again, and then his partner, Val, who's played by Lance Henriksen. God, that guy never looked young. But the two of them are essentially provide the comic relief here. And again, free motion camera. This is all done in one take. So it starts with the guy with his face pressed up against the window. You can see him in the background as he's being interrogated through the window behind Val. Look at the name, Ed. And these two are essentially having a conversation very quickly. Again, this is exposition. This is comic relief. It's a very economic scene. And they establish very quickly as they're walking through the police station, they don't even have time to sit down, that they're dealing with a one-day pattern killer. You cut to Sarah and Ginger here in their 1980s regalia, better than mortal man deserves. Very 80s. I grew up in the early 90s, of course, and they still had classic, sort of call now and order your collection of classic 80s tunes. And they had a lot of music videos on MTV from the 80s. So I was pretty familiar with this. Growing up from 1980s, I was born in 1986, so I don't really have a lot of memories of the 80s. But I definitely watched a lot of TV in the early 90s, and you could still kind of catch a lot of the 80s vibes on 90s television. This guy on the phone, Sarah's boyfriend, is actually voiced by James Cameron on her voice messages, which again dates this film. I mean, back in the day, they would have had analog tape for their voice message machine, and it's not something that you really see in this day and age. I don't even know if people really check their messages anymore because you have social media and stuff like that. Damn it, Matt. Again, Matt is kind of the sort of foreshadowing later what happens to Sarah, even right here in the parking structure. And again, notice the lighting. It's very bleak, very dark. Most of this film is shot at night, especially early on in the film. It takes place entirely, pretty much from Sarah's point of view, apart from her being at work. It takes place entirely in one night. up until they escape from the police station. So essentially, it gives the film a very real feeling, as though all of this is unfolding in almost in real time. Aristotle would approve. One of the Aristotelian virtues was that a play is supposed to take place in a period of 24 or less hours. And this film sort of accomplishes that. A good portion of it occurs largely in, again, a handful of hours. Feels very real. And again, we have a little bit more exposition. I love the signs, too, like Lieutenant Traxler, homicide, and just little details like that. You know, this police station is basically a set, and yet at the same time, you know, it feels they really went the extra mile in, as far as props and things like that. And I love the interaction between these two. Coffee's 2 hours cold. I put a cigarette in it, and he has no idea, and he took a sip anyways. Doesn't even seem to notice. I guess it adds to the flavor. Color again. I just, it's so quote worthy, and they're very funny. And of course, he asks for a cigarette, but he doesn't. He's sort of forgotten in the accelerated situation. He doesn't even realize that he's holding a cigarette. God, look at that messaging machine. Fooled you. You're talking to a machine. And again, a bit of dark humor here. And Matt and Ginger getting freaky. Again, look at that Walkman. You know, back in the day, that would have been top of the line. You know, that'd be like having an iPhone nowadays. Something like that. A bit of black humor from Lance Henriksen. I hate these press cases, especially the weird ones. And again, this is how they would have had to do this. There was no internet in this day and age, so they'd have to do everything by television. So he opens the door, and it cuts very quickly. Again, this film has very tight editing. And look at that, you know, that's a CRT television monitor. They didn't have flat screens back in the day. Again, there's a lot of smoke. Again, it feels very real. Of course, in those days, people smoked cigarettes a lot more. And again, all of these actors feel like extras. None of them are Hollywood people. And yet, it doesn't have the same feeling that, say, Samurai Cop does. You know, it's like, yeah, these people are unrecognizable, but it makes the film feel real, not tacky or fake. I love the music here, too. It really reminds me of some of the music from Resident Evil. Not the movie, but the game. Just that dark, ominous kind of piano. As far as I understand it, Brad Fiedel recorded all of this on a MIDI piano. Or large portions of it. You know, electronic violins and things like that. Back in the days, I don't even know if they have phone books anymore nowadays. She realizes that she's next in line. And you have this extra standing behind her. To this day, I do not know who that guy is. And she's going to make a call, of course, but then, oh, no dial tone because it's out of order. And back in the day, kids, that kind of thing would happen. They had payphones. They don't anymore. But if you watch, say, Deadpool 2, when he's doing the Superman thing and he's in the phone booth, he's like, what is this, 1998? A little bit of product placement, Dreyer's ice cream. I have to wonder if it looks like a real street. You know, they wouldn't have been able to make their own sort of street like in Rear Window with Alfred Hitchcock. And then you have Reese here. She thinks that it's him, you know, and it's, again, we know that he's the good guy at this point, basically. He's the Terminator. He would just hop on her and shoot her right there in the street, but he's not. So it's, again, it's a part of what the audience knows versus what the character on screen knows. And Sarah, of course, is afraid, but Tech-Noir, as far as I understand it, is a disco bar. It was a set. $450. In order to go back to use the payphone, she's got to shell out $450. And but this wasn't an actual place. They had to make this. It took a couple of weeks to build this set, and then they trashed the place in a matter of moments when Arnold shows up. But from what I understand, they would have people walking in off the street to dance here because they thought that it was a real place. And they're like, no, no, and these are all extras. But it feels, again, very, very convincing, very real. The music sounds a little bit 80s and kind of out of time with today's audience. But back in the day, you know, the triangles, which as far as I know is just the band that wrote music for this film. That was very much par for the course. So that car pulls off to go investigate a call at Cameron Street. That's a nod to James Cameron, the director of the film. Again, the photography here is great because you have this extreme close-up of Arnold, the same take as he walks up to the doors of this apartment complex. And this is one of my favorite shots in the film here. You have the door opening, and then Ginger is followed by the cameraman, and he's crouching at this point and kind of looking up at her. It creates kind of an awkward angle for the film, but again, this feeling of stalking. She's being stalked by the cameraman, essentially, and shot from an uncomfortable angle, adding to the tension of the film. There's no music, of course, except what we're listening to through the headphones of her Walkman. She's making herself a sandwich, seemingly innocent activity, and then we have a bit of a jump scare here with Pugsley. Right on time. Gonna make a belt out of you. Poor Pugsley. We never learn what happens to old Pugsley after this. Assuming he roams freed from his master. We have a demonstration here again. Arnold Schwarzenegger's T-800 is much more violent immediately than Kyle Reese's character. But again, it sort of demonstrates the irrationality of Sarah Connor being afraid in that instance. She doesn't know who the bad guy is. And again, the actor who plays Ginger, the actor who plays Matt, you don't really know who these people are, so it feels very real. Sort of a low-budget kind of horror feel. I love this, how she just throws the food up in the air and drops it. The cross-cutting as Matt's getting his butt kicked. She runs away, and this film makes really good use of slow motion. She turns around, bam. And I love this shot. Again, the same camera angle where the cameraman is on the floor, sort of looking up, and she's trying to crawl away, and it's a very cold, heartless sort of scene. There's no mercy, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is very, very much an assassin here. I love that. You see the flash of the laser and then focusing, dialing in on the phone, so to speak. I think you have the same voice message from Ginger. And then when she says Ginger, that's me. It cuts to Ginger's face. And we see, of course, she's expired from her injuries at this point. This movie has such excellent editing. And then we learn at this point there's a lot of different things going on, but the Terminator has just killed Ginger. But he learns who Sarah is, and he hears her voice, so he knows that it's not the woman on the floor. That's Ginger. So there's a lot of different things going on, and if you pay attention, you can understand how the Terminator learns what it knows. Sets down the gun to go digging. And this is back in the day, of course, when you would have phone books, like personal phone books, log books to sort of keep track of your phone numbers. Nowadays, our phones do that for us. Sarah Connor. She's a graduate of some university. I never noticed that before. I always thought that was a driver's license. Yeah, it's on Pico. Now, Tech-Noir, as far as I understand it, is sort of a nod to the overarching theme of the film, where you have the combination between the noir films of the 40s and 50s, but then sort of blending that bleakness blended in with the technology of the period to sort of create a new sort of amalgam. The Terminator, man and machine, Tech-Noir. Everything is, of course, made out of metal here. The seats, the chairs, this grate that Schwarzenegger looks through as he pushes his way through the line. Hey, that guy didn't pay. Arnold Schwarzenegger gives a really great performance here because he has to convey everything merely through his facial expression. Very intense, very powerful man, and he kind of lumbers his way through the scene, sort of burning the audience with his gaze. Very intense. If you look closely, though, you can see a lot of the extras in the scene kind of teleport around. You have the woman in the red skirt and the blue top, for instance, with the stripes. I always thought she looked a little bit like Pat Benatar. This is my favorite shot in the whole film. Is slow motion, as she doesn't get caught by Schwarzenegger because she knocks something over with her elbow, but it all occurs very naturally. It's a very fluid scene. And then you can hear the music start to fade out, and then Brad Feidel's score kicks in and gradually gets louder and louder as Arnold Schwarzenegger realizes that, hey, I just walked past my target. He saw something that perhaps we didn't. I love that when he turns around, does a double take, as it were. I guess even machines do that. Very 80s, though. And they're all dancing kind of the same way. It's a disco. No one really knows how to dance. But back in the day, that would have been cool. Except for that guy with the black tape on his... I just saw someone in the background with Sex Pistols stitched under their jacket. Some really goofy costumes. But again, it's a disco bar. And Kyle Reese pumps his shotgun yet again. The Terminator cocks his pistol. Some excellent editing, though. They wait until the last second for Kyle Reese to fire. You have people getting trampled and running out. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, being the cold machine that he is, decides to just start gunning everyone down. A good use of squibs here. In this day and age, I don't even think they would use squibs. Everything would be digital. The muzzle flare of the Uzi would be digital. Some excellent shots here, too, of Schwarzenegger. Very mechanical as he's sort of attempting to deal with Kyle Reese. Though he fires that last bullet. And what if he had not fired that last shot, but instead just walked up to Sarah and put a bullet in her head? Might not have killed her, but excellent editing. The rising of the strings, and then boom, he jumps out at the last second. Just perfect editing for that type of sequence. And essentially at this point, the foreplay is over and the chase is on. And the rest of the film is essentially an extended chase sequence. Look at the harsh lighting. The lights behind Schwarzenegger, how stark they are, almost blinding. Of course, the club riddled with bullets is filled with smoke at this point. Of course, the budget is so low that they weren't really able to show much of Arnold Schwarzenegger's vision. Whereas if you watch the second film, for instance, they were able to have much longer sequences with Arnold Schwarzenegger's vision. Not in this film. In this film, you get maybe one or two shots. Of course, a bit of Hollywood magic here. I don't think he would be able to ignite the gas from the gas tank because bullets don't spark. Excellent photography, though. And again, that slow motion shot as he punches, quote unquote, through the windshield. It's actually a hydraulic ram. And you have, the A and B camera. The B camera's from Schwarzenegger's point of view, or rather behind Schwarzenegger, and then the A camera from inside the car. It's good use of that to capture a lot of really nice shots. And it's edited together very well. It's not confusing. You see just enough to kind of give you an idea of what's going on, but it's not Blender editing the way it is. 1L19 here is actually the screenwriter for the film, so there's a bit of a cameo here. Wonk. I always love that. Of course, Schwarzenegger's eyebrows have been burned off, so a bit of verisimilitude here. He jumped through the fire and his eyebrows are gone. Not something that I noticed when I was a kid right away, but you start to notice these things, and then you're like, where the hell did his eyebrows go? And again, because this film moves so quickly, the only time for exposition is during the chase. So we have Kyle Reese, who's like, hey, have you been shot? Are you injured? And then he starts to tell his side of the story, but not before locking her in the car. And her reaction feels fairly realistic. She tries to run away. She's not going to think that this guy's from the future. It's just some weirdo who's kidnapped her, even though he says, come with me if you want to live. She's just, again, this movie has slasher tropes, and she's the damsel in distress. She's the victim. She's being stalked in the same sense that Laurie Strode would be in Halloween. Some great chase sequences, though. As far as I understand it, in certain instances, they actually had to speed the footage up slightly to make it appear as though the cars were going faster. I love this too. He doesn't really have any time to slow things down. He just starts spitting out this information because honestly, what would you do in that situation? Okay, I'm going to explain this to you in a way that would make sense. I'm going to slow it down. Nope. I'm Sergeant Reese, or I'm Reese, Sergeant Tech-Com, here's my number. And again, a very quick scene where we learn the Terminator can replicate the voices of those that it's heard. A nice little special effect. Very easy to produce. And again, this movie is really brilliant in regards to its special effects because it does the maximum amount that it can with its budget. 101. Again, all of this is exposition that they're telling during a chase. A lot of films make the mistake of having exposition and chase be separate. But this movie combines them, and it gives a very tight sort of economic feel. And we get to learn, we're along for the ride, and as we're on this ride, we get to learn about what this thing is that's chasing Sarah. And of course, there's no X-ray. We don't see inside the Terminator until the very end of the film when his flesh is burned off. But up until then, he looks like a man. This movie kind of plays on our fears. Maybe Sarah is right. Her initial impression. Maybe Kyle is just a man, and the Terminator is just a man. Except we as an audience know better because Schwarzenegger's character, the T-800, punched a hole through one of the assailants who attacked him with a knife very early on in the film. But it still has fun with the audience, and it still presents us with the possibility that, hey, maybe this is all in Sarah's head. And even if we know better, it can still present us with this argument. I love that shot, too, where the car sort of pulls up and then pulls away. You see the hubcap sort of rolling away as they pull into the parking structure. The camera on the dashboard as they're driving along through the parking lot, and it's very quick and very guerrilla style shooting here, and just everything is moving very fast, but it's coherent, and that's why I think this film works as well as it does. And again, the way that Kyle Reese is attempting to explain everything to Sarah, he's trying to give her enough information, but there's no time to really absorb it. And I imagine when I first saw this film as a kid, I probably had the same reaction that Sarah did. It's like, hey, what the hell are you talking about, buddy? But then we learn, hey, this is from the future. It's like, oh, is Reese crazy? And of course we know better, and yet the film presents it in such a way that he's kind of unhinged. He's that kind of character, and I love that about him. It introduces a certain amount of suspicion or drama. The idea that, you may know something, but it presents things that make you doubt what you know. Because Reese isn't the typical hero. He's the anti-hero. He's unhinged. He even threatens her. He says, don't do that again. And it's not like he's wearing kid gloves. He doesn't sugarcoat things. That Terminator is out there, and it's not going to stop until you're dead. And he doesn't have time to sort of try and seduce her. He's just telling it to her straight. And he's this unhinged, dirty hero from the future, a resistance soldier. Just look at the intensity on his face. And Sarah, of course, is sort of caught between a rock and a hard place at this point. She doesn't really have any option but to agree with him at this stage. It's not really fair to her as a character, but them's the breaks. Of course, earlier on in the film we saw how ineffective a switchblade was, and now we saw how ineffective a shotgun was. Though, again, there's a certain sort of psychological aspect to this film where they try and explain it through PCP and him wearing a bulletproof vest, when in fact, no, he's a cybernetic soldier from the future. But the movie sort of presents how normal people would respond to this situation logically through reason, which again gives it a certain air of realism. Sort of like The Exorcist. They don't automatically think that it's Pazuzu in that film possessing Linda Blair's character. They think that there must be something wrong with her brain or her psychologically. So it just adds to the realism of the film. They don't automatically agree with Kyle Reese. They try and rationalize the violence, these extraordinary events that are occurring. I love that too. You can see the bite marks on Kyle Reese's hand. There's a certain amount of continuity in this film. Very low budget, but very well made. So Sarah at this point, she's in shock, but she's sort of playing along with him at this point. Probably one of my favorite moments of the film. Kyle Reese's soliloquy, if you will, where he explains the future. And we did have that instance earlier on in the film, of course, where we essentially are told everything by the credits sequence at the start. But this works so much better. And it all works according to Kyle Reese's sort of delivery. Michael Biehn does a fabulous job. And we're free to imagine the war. It was the machine, Sarah. This whole place, everything is gone. But we get to imagine it. And, in the back of our minds, we might even wonder, how much of this is real? Is it all in Kyle Reese's head? And it's not that it isn't real, but that we doubt him as a character because he's so unstable and he's so intense that he's also kind of charismatic. But this excellent dialogue. The screenwriters did a fabulous job with it. And your attention is just completely on Kyle Reese. And again, we have the third way to steal a car. It won't work nowadays. Nowadays, you don't even have keys in the same sense that you would have had in 1984 for vehicles. Again, that intense lighting from the flashlight that's almost blinding. And we learn, of course, that Kyle Reese never even saw the war, which is one reason why perhaps we don't have a flashback for it in the sequence. We're just told essentially a framed narrative. He was told the story from someone else, and then he's telling the story to Sarah Connor. And we're left to imagine, just as he's left to imagine, just as Sarah's left to imagine, what the actual war was like. There's only tiny bits of proof to sort of provide veracity to his tale that, branded by laser scanner, the scars on his body, his recollection of hiding from HK, starving, working in the camps. And just a tiny bit of music as accenting the conversation. His name was Connor, your unborn son. And as soon as he says that, there's just a tiny little musical accent from Brad Feidel's score. This movie is full of little punctuations like that really add to the emotional impact or the tension. And again, that dun 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 dun, very reminiscent of the musical coda from Beethoven's Fifth, dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun, which in that symphony, the first movement was actually death knocking on a door. And here in Terminator, it's very similar. Death comes calling. Here's Schwarzenegger. Essentially death personified in the tradition of, say, Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger. Because again, this is partially a slasher film. If you look closely in this shot, you can tell that the person who's driving and the stunt driver isn't actually Michael Biehn, but only in certain shots. This is probably one of my favorite chase scene in the film. Again, the overpowering light from the headlights of the police cars, it's chasing them down, kind of blinding them and the audience. And again, that instance right there, sped up footage to make things appear as though they're driving faster than they really are. But no green screens, though, no blue screens, nothing like that. This is all real shots of them driving back and forth with stunt drivers. Almost a Western, if you will. You could imagine them riding on horseback and shooting at each other with revolvers, except in this film it's shotguns. You have just enough close-ups of Kyle Reese, or Michael Biehn, playing Kyle Reese to say, hey, that's not always a stunt driver. I love that shot, too. The car whooshes past them. You can see sparks that sort of brushes up against the wall. There's so many tiny little details like that. squibs and then blowing holes in the door with the actors behind the door. Excellent. And you can see that that's Sarah Connor and Michael Biehn in the car as they're speeding along. A real impact, too, when he drives into the wall. As far as I can tell, that was a dummy, and they actually drove the car into the wall to add maximum visceral impact. And those cars are out of focus, those police vehicles, as they drive over. And then they pull in front of Sarah. And at this point, she might not fully trust him, but she says, "Don't. They'll kill you." And again, the attitude of police officers in 1984. Don't, Reese, don't. They'll kill you. Sarah's no dummy in this situation. She's just a real person put into a situation that's kind of extraordinary. But she's not as dumb as she looks. And then you see the worried look on her face, and it cuts, or it sort of looks very quickly over to the police cruiser, and for whatever reason, the Terminator is gone. Now, this is the head scratcher in the film. Given the importance of the Terminator's mission, you think it very easily could have killed Sarah right then and there before the police officers would have even had a chance to react. But again, I think the novelization of the film sort of explains that the Terminator made a threat assessment. There were so many police officers, and he was effectively disarmed at this point, out of ammunition, and he wanted to make sure that he could retreat, make the repairs that he needed, because his eye is damaged and his arm is damaged. And I think he wanted to be a little bit more better prepared in that situation. Some good acting by the different actors here. Paul Winfield, and I forget the name of the actor who plays Dr. Silverman, but he does a fabulous job. On screen here, Lance Henriksen, Paul Winfield, Silverman's actor, and then Linda Hamilton. These are probably it's the most star-studded shot in the film, which says something, given that a lot of those characters aren't even stars. The only real star of the film, as far as I'm concerned, really is Schwarzenegger. And when this film again was made, he wasn't really a star. When Dolph Lundgren did Masters of the Universe in 1987, that was his second film, and he wasn't really a star in that film, but he was a starring actor. Excellent photography here. Again, it's just a black silhouette of Schwarzenegger's head, and then when he turns on the light, very stark lighting. Again, look at how dingy this place looks, and all the props. You can see the ammunition. I watched this film with a friend once, and he was able to point out, yeah, there's the gun cleaning kit. Again, very realistic props. It's not just random things that they have here. Extreme close-up of the scalpel. I think, for a low-budget film, actually they did a fairly good job with this hand as he's cutting open the tissue. Of course, most of the actual surgery occurs off screen, and we get to listen, and then we see him put the bloody tool away, but we don't actually see most of the surgery itself, which sort of lends to the power of the scene. It allows us to imagine what's going on, and then it cuts down to the hand he's cut open the tissue, and we can see it's a great prop. The moving parts inside, you can see the finger moving, and him sort of making repairs. And then you see the laser scan on Kyle Reese's forearm as he's sitting in the chair. Probably my favorite dialogue scene in the film, because this is the film at its most psychological, where the characters are trying to convince Sarah Connor that Kyle Reese is a loon. Some really good dialogue, though. And again, this is all left to our imaginations. There's no flashbacks here. This is just everything told from a framed narrative. Kyle Reese remembering what he learned from his experiences in the war, telling it to Dr. Silverman, who tells it to Sarah Connor, who may as well be the audience. And again, Sarah Connor is skeptical in the situation, but not only Sarah Connor, but Paul Winfield's character, Lieutenant Traxler. It's not just, hey, he's stupid, or it's not just, hey, he's right. There's a lot of psychological warfare going on here. Dr. Silverman is playing one side of the argument, Kyle Reese is on the other, and we're all kind of observing it. And Kyle Reese doesn't know everything either. He knew that it was called time displacement equipment, but he didn't build the fucking thing. He knows just enough to complete his mission, just enough to tell them something. very intense performance by Michael Biehn. This is probably my favorite role by him if I had to pick one. And we have the second operating scene here. This is a similar scene in Terminator 2. It was a deleted scene where they take the CPU chip out of... And if you look closely, when Schwarzenegger puts the razor up to his... or the scalpel up to his eye, there's actually no X-Acto blade. He's just holding a handle at this point. But it's all carefully shot in such a way so that it appears as though he's cutting into his own eye. We just see his face, of course. We don't see the reflection at this point. Most of the surgery, again, occurs off screen, allowing us to sort of imagine what's going on. And then we have the fake head, which, given the budget of this film, doesn't really look that bad. It looks very mechanical. You can tell that there, again, is an actual eye underneath that tissue, and it moves very convincingly. I think out of all the Terminator sort of mechanical eyes that we see, I like this one over the one in Terminator 2, for instance, when Arnold's face is damaged, and we can see the one there. It looked kind of like a Christmas light, but this one, it's mechanical, and it moves, it animates, and it's inside the face. It's a very simple shot. You have to wonder how effective those glasses, the gargoyles, would be at actually concealing his injury. I love, of course, when the score starts picking up here. You have just tiny bits of detail, those neon letters, sort of lighting up and powering down outside. There's so much to notice in this film. It's very, very rich sets. And again, we have an extension of the frame narrative where Kyle Reese has relayed his story to Dr. Silverman. Silverman has recorded it, and they're playing it back for Sarah. And of course, while they were recording it, Traxler was observing it from the other side of the one-way mirror. And now he's watching it again here, and you can tell that he's a little bit more skeptical. Silverman's laughing. He thinks it's funny. It's a joke to him. Most paranoid delusions are intricate, but this is brilliant. He's happy. He's in his element right now. I'm not sure what Lance Henriksen's holding in his hand there. He's playing with some kind of prop. You have that blonde guy behind all of them with the mustache that later on Kyle Reese knocks out before he makes his escape. As far as I understand it, this line was actually something that Kyle Reese, or Michael Biehn actually, it was his idea to include this in the film. And he looks up at the camera. You still don't get this, do you? And I love Silverman looks at the camera and he realizes that, Kyle Reese realizes that he's being recorded. But this was largely Michael Biehn's idea. Pretty effective. But this whole time, we have an intelligent character like Sarah Connor. She's weighing this. She's trying to reason through it. She's skeptical. She just doesn't take it at face value. And of course, we know more than she does, but it kind of illustrates she's able to kind of think for herself. And then later in the film, she ultimately makes the choice to run away from the police station with Kyle Reese. I love this part too. Again, this exorcist type of reasoning where they're like, oh, he must have been wearing a bulletproof vest, or he was probably on PCP. And again, all of this is going on very quickly. The chase is still on, folks. It's the eye of the storm, so to speak. And constantly throughout this film, you have very quick, tightly edited conversations that are going on. As characters, they're never really still. We're constantly moving or cutting from scene to scene, and the dialogue keeps things continuous. And can we really argue with Traxler at this point based on what he knows? 30 cops in this building. The guy would have to be completely nuts to try anything, right? I always like this too. There's sort of a close shave where Silverman makes his narrow escape, not even realizing that his life was in danger. It's kind of fun to sort of pause the movie and read all the bulletins on the bulletin board. The window is dirty. It has fingerprints on it. The cop sitting behind it is wearing this wrinkled uniform. He looks kind of dejected. It's fairly realistic looking, I think. And then, of course, you have Schwarzenegger. Again, this whole time, there's a lot of different things going on. He looks at the structural integrity of this. He's like, I could probably drive a car through it. It's his eureka moment. If you look closely, you can actually see that his eye isn't damaged. Those glasses aren't totally opaque. And of course, I love that the door doesn't shut. He swings it with such force that it stays open. We have some extreme close-ups, jump cuts, if you will, of him writing. And then I love the editing in this movie. Yeah, of course, I have the dummy of the guy behind the desk in several shots, but then there's one or two shots where they use a real actor to make it look more convincing. I love that too. You have a squib in the coffee cup that blows up in the guy's hand. A lot of cross-cutting between Sarah and Schwarzenegger. And again, it's very quick, but very well done. Not confusing. It makes it frantic, I think, but at the same time, not utterly incoherent. It moves along quickly. So we get to find out how Sarah Connor is feeling and what Schwarzenegger is doing simultaneously. I always wonder why those shots were in slow motion. Maybe to illustrate that maybe there's a disconnect between how the Terminator perceives reality versus everyone else. Bit of a jump cut when he shoots that guy in the back. And again, at this point, the Terminator has been fully repaired. He has an arsenal with him. I forget the different weapons. He has an automatic rifle with jungle-style clips duct taped together. He's knocked out. I always was a little bit unconvinced by Reese knocking him out, but I love the music, so it doesn't really matter. It's like, yeah, okay, I don't know if that would work, but boy, does that music sound awesome. But yeah, Schwarzenegger, he has banana clips for his automatic rifle that have been duct taped together, so there's a point later on in this scene where he reloads his weapon, and we can see him doing it. He had a certain amount of training for that. Again, I love this. Just a lot of his shattering glass in this film. It's very visually exciting. A lot of cross-cutting. Yeah, see where he turns the clip over and he reloads his weapon. I can't think of too many films where we actually see that, but they had a certain amount of training with that. With Schwarzenegger, to have him handle these weapons, they had an armory where they were... There's a lot of variety, the cops have M16s. Their rifles are different than the one that Schwarzenegger has. He has the riot shotgun that he fires in one hand to kind of illustrate his strength, because, again, the police officers have to hold their weapons in both hands. There's a lot of variety here. Now, are we supposed to believe that that's Schwarzenegger? Again, there's a certain amount of tension. The editing and the way that it's presented to us throws things into doubt, sort of. That you can kind of tell that, again, if you look closely, you can see that that's Michael Baine's face. But again, after weighing all of the options, she makes her choice. I love this. This is my favorite musical moment in the film. If you play Hotline Miami 2, there's a level with Richard where they actually take this theme and turn it into a full-blown level music, essentially. And it sounds so good. And of course, they just hired one guy to essentially do the music by himself at home. They didn't hire an orchestra, nothing like that. He did all the music himself. Very gritty, realistic scene. And you'll notice that Schwarzenegger has taken some damage. There are bullet holes in his coat. He's bleeding, but it just wasn't enough. And again, the idea of having sound effects occurring off-screen, they could easily bloat the movie with additional scenes having newscasters or having police at the police station combing the scene, trying to find out what happened. Instead, they sort of summarize everything very quickly with a radio announcement. And then they're able to keep the movie moving forward. It doesn't drag at all. They have clever ways of having exposition or storytelling devices that allow you to sort of proceed the narrative without bogging things down, without slowing down the action. Because again, this part of the film is essentially an extended chase sequence. Again, very gritty. Everything's dirty, dark. Leaves cover the ground, and but it feels very real. Again, I doubt this was a set. This is probably an actual underpass of some kind where they're taking shelter. And that's one reason why I really like low-budget movies like this, because they add a feeling of realism to the film. And then we learn his first name. It's interesting. It's sort of riffing off the idea of the mysterious stranger, where we only learn their nickname, but now you start to identify with the character a little bit more. You learn his first name. You learn about his past, which is our future. And this movie kind of has fun with that, too. You're talking about things I haven't done yet. In the past tense. You're driving me crazy. And this is sort of a bonding moment, if you will. And this is the first point where we see Sarah Connor's maternal instincts come to play. She's like, "What? You've been shot?" Sort of a bonding moment, if you will, where she gives him her very first field dressing. Product placement with an actual first aid kit. Bleakly lit by a flashlight that they took from the car. Again, everything in this movie is lit in such a way. Blue lighting, but very stark lighting. Through a very dirty lens that we see this narrative unfold. It's interesting, too. She wants to know about her son. And then we realize that, hey, he's sort of gazing into her eyes. And maybe his feelings towards her aren't quite as cold or businesslike as we would have thought initially. Because early on in the film, Kyle is sort of threatening her, throwing her around, saying, "Don't bite me again." And now he's a little bit more... There's a certain intimacy to the scene. They're very close together. They're huddling up for warmth. And they're kind of exchanging stories about themselves. A little bit of sort of foreshadowing. But they cut it off before Kyle Reese can say too much. But again, there's so much exposition here. This is a scene that's largely exposition, but it unfolds in a very natural fashion. And it's all left to our imagination. Everything is moving forward. She's giving him field dressing, seeing to his injuries, and they're sort of telling more about the plot, cleverly disguised as a conversation. The way that they would do this nowadays is they would have a narrator off screen narrating all of this, and the movie would just kind of stop moving. But here, even a scene where they're hiding, everything is kind of moving forward. She's able to... There's constantly action on screen, and they're talking and performing actions at the same time, and yet leaving most of it to our imaginations. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best way to do things, and this movie does it really well. And again, we have a certain intelligent response here from Sarah. I mean, I totally get why she feels the way she does. Do I look like the mother from the future? Am I tough? She doesn't want it. Her reaction is very understandable. Everything that she does in this film, she's skeptical, she questions. She's smarter than she could be in this type of film. She just isn't. She's not the buxom damsel in distress. She's able to think for herself, even if she's not a soldier yet. You can see that she could very easily become one if she puts her mind to it. No fate but what we make for ourselves. And we see her kind of evolving, though. Thinking for herself, standing up for herself. Early on in the film, she's a waitress. And she's being pushed around, and she's not really that happy. And she gains a certain amount of autonomy here. Here, she's helped Kyle Reese. She's escaped from the police station. She's made choices. She's given him a field dressing, her first. And she's kind of playing along at this point. It's kind of interesting, this sort of an innocence to Kyle Reese's character. He doesn't know what to say. About what? The only kind of entertainment that he has is talking about his past. Where he came from, there was no movie theaters. There was no way to have fun. Nothing like that. No disco scenes or anything like that, what they have in 1984. He just comes from this terrifying future. But Sarah needs something to sort of occupy herself. And again, we have, again, a visual coda here as we return to the future. You have a similar shot, the identical shot that we saw early on in the film. But then it cuts to some new footage. I really like this too. Again, look at that analog quality, the film grain on these visors. And again, these are real weapons, given some futuristic sort of additions to make them seem more futuristic than they actually are. Everything looks... You see the skull on top of the cinder blocks as they're moving through the sewers here, stepping over this pipe across the metal grates, and we can see just enough of them to have an idea of what these men look like. But for the most part, they're hidden by their own lights, by the shadows. Everything looks so dirty and bleak. And then you have that military sort of march, almost a funeral march, by Brad Fiedel as they descend the steps. Again, free motion camera, and that bright light that hides the letters on the sign, the danger sign. Everything in this movie is so stark. There's such a sharp contrast. Shadows or light, but there's no... And it really conceals everything. Just look at that smoke. Look at the guy holding the machine gun. It's actually, as far as I understand it, a lot of these weapons are taken from real points in history. Sort of a hand-me-down quality to what these soldiers are using as weapons. Who only knows where they got those ray guns from. But just I love the detail on his outfit. Yeah, it's shitty looking, but there's just so much to it. You see his name stitched across his chest. The etching on his pauldron, if it will, his headset, he has face paint. Everyone here, they look so dirty, like they're actually members of a refugee camp. You can see what looks like cat food in some type of container. These people are eating gruel. They're miserable. And it's not like Terminator Genesis where everyone is clean, they're well fed. And it looks much less dismal in that film than it does in this one, because here the people are hopeless. They're in darkness, they're starving, they're hiding from HKs. And we see what Kyle Reese was talking about earlier in the film. This is all that they have, and they're hanging on by a thread, so to speak. Like that rat in the hand of that boy, that hunter. If you look at it from a certain point of view, they're the rat dangling from the hunter's hand, about to be eaten. Maybe a bit of foreshadowing, because now here comes Franco Columbo. Brrr, cue the guitar chord. I love that. And he pulls out a Vickers machine gun. Again, this is a machine gun from World War II that has been sort of repurposed cosmetically to look slightly different. And again, what we're hearing here is the stereo track. I'm not as much of a fan of it as the original mono track for this. The machine gun sounds a lot more powerful with the original mono track. It's not terrible, but it sounds thunderous, positively thunderous in the original, with the original track. And he's constantly mowing everyone down. This is probably the most harrowing scene in the film, because it really illustrates just how hopeless the future is. Again, he's powerful, he's muscular, he's completely unstoppable. And you have this very famous shot with the demonic sort of eyes as he's moving along, firing his weapon. And then we sort of fade to Sarah Connor, who is now in Kyle Reese's arms, and we have another sort of hint that his purpose for going back in time wasn't entirely businesslike. He is comforting her, caring for her. But he doesn't just spit it out. He doesn't just... It takes its time to sort of... It lets us suspect or hint. It hints at these things and lets us wonder about it. But it keeps things moving, too. And again, more smoke. There's constantly smoke in this movie, even during the daytime. Smoke everywhere. Fog, technically, but again, her carrying the flashlight and the little details like that you never notice. The flashlight and the first aid kit. A bit of continuity here as we realize that the Terminator has taken the address book. Here the head looks a little bit fake, and you have to wonder if his flesh is rotting. Hey buddy, you got a dead cat in there. In Terminator 2, it's suggested that the tissue will actually heal, but here we have an injury that's so great that it's potentially unable to heal. It just rots. I love this too. Sometimes this is how I go about conversations with people. How should I respond to them? And I would always visualize it like that. I love the detail of that character actor too, the guy who plays the custodian. Look at the dinginess of this apartment that he's at. I love it. Again, that reaction too. Just things are constantly moving here, and again, the Tiki Motel. I had to wonder if this was an actual hotel or if it was a set. But just about everything in this movie feels real. Bit of foreshadowing there. That truck we'll see later in the film. A German Shepherd, much like the hounds that we saw in the future, and you'll notice that Reese is being friendly towards them. So there's always something going on in this movie. It's very busy. A lot of interaction between, and you have Reese, who, again, constantly busy in this movie, is looking behind the curtains to make sure that they're not being followed. And apart from that, it looks very much like an apartment would look like in that scene. Or in the type of place that they're at. They pay in cash. He doesn't know where he got the money. It's very dingy. Essentially a flop house. But it only adds to the verisimilitude of the film, I think. Everything looks appropriate. What looks like a dingy apartment, it looks like a dingy apartment should. The disco bar looks like a disco bar. The police station looks like a police station. And here you have someone in the background filling up his car. A lot of these people are these extras. Maybe, maybe not, but it looks real, very believable. And if you're paying attention, of course, you know that the Terminator can mimic people's voices. And we have Sarah Connor, who makes a mistake here at this point in the film. Of course, in this day and age, you'd have to exchange phone numbers. You wouldn't have phones that would keep phone numbers inside the phone itself. But you see that, of course, Sarah Connor's mother has died at this point. But they don't show it. They just leave it to our imagination. But look at how populated this set is. And the door's shot open. Everything's darkly lit. But you see all of these props. I wonder who did the voice for Sarah Connor's mother. I wonder if it was Linda Hamilton's actual mother. I'm not sure, though. But that would be funny if it was. Well, we only see this set for a brief moment, but it's very nicely decorated, and it's constantly moving. And then we cut to them. Reese returned from shopping, and he rips the bag open, and again, props galore, and everything is that light in the left-hand corner. There's a light off screen to the right. Everything. This movie is so well lit, but it looks gritty. There's such attention to detail. So many. If you watch like The Room by Tommy Wiseau, everything looks empty and things draw attention to themselves. Here, it just feels like a canvas that is well painted, and it just adds to the overall picture. Never really liked that bike. I always preferred the Harley Davidson, the T800 drives or rides in Terminator 2. And again, you can see scars on Reese's right arm, and he has his hand bandaged, I assume from... Yeah, you see the bandage closer to his elbow. You see the bandage where she bit his hand. Looks like they used the first aid kit on that. Again, this movie has a lot of continuity. And then, of course, you fast forward and you see all the bombs sort of lined up here. And again, just the detail of the chair, the lamp, and slowly moving the watch on the nightstand with the crystal ashtray, because back in those days people would have smoked. The rotary phone. I remember being in a hotel just like this and seeing a phone just like that as a kid. And again, Reese looking out the window, and he's shirtless, and we can see that Sarah Connor is kind of seeing the scars on his body for the first time. And again, there's a certain kind of moment of doubt here, where she's like, I'm not the legend you thought I was. And love will out, so to speak. And this is when all of our suspicions about how Reese feels are solidified, and we're able to sort of confirm his feelings. Sarah Connor asks about the women in Kyle Reese's time. His response is, of course, typical of someone from his history, his origins. And we even have the flashback sequence with the beautiful woman who was killed right before him. It kind of implies that there is almost a stultifying quality or prohibiting quality to sexuality in the future due to the stark reality of the world that they live in. And there's sort of a mad desire in Kyle Reese to find love, and in order to do that he has to escape the future, the loveless future where there is no love, where the women are only soldiers and everyone is dying in front of him. He has to escape to the past to find the woman that he loves, the only window of which that he had was a single Polaroid photograph. And again, more continuity where he talks about the picture. And when we first see the picture earlier in the film, during the massacre sequence, we don't know how he came by it. And now we learn about that. And again, everything in this film is connected. Of course, in this shot, I think that Michael Biehn looks a little bit cleaned up, a little bit more handsome. He still has scars, of course. He's a good-looking guy. I can understand his motives. Yeah, it's a love story, but Sarah Connor's a very likable, believable character. She's no dummy. And as wounded and intense as Kyle Reese is, you learn that he's still a man, that he's still capable of love. I might not recommend doing this part where he's very forcefully shoving the pipe bombs into the bag. Again, more scars. It's a very wounded individual. He appears to have finally washed his hair. And of course, Sarah has been cock-blocked throughout this entire film. So, in a certain sense, they're both sexually frustrated. They're put into these extenuating circumstances where they need some type of release or catharsis. What better form of release than an orgasm? Something to take your mind off the pain. It's very intense, this type of kissing, the way that they're making love here. Kind of reminds me of Rocky up to a certain point. That first kiss between Rocky and Adrian, where that repression gives way to sort of giving into one's vices. And again, cross-cutting too. And the music by Brad Fiedel here is one of my favorites from the entire score. And as inadvisable as it might be for them to let down their guards and have sex, you can understand why they're doing it. They've been through so much together that they just need something to take their minds off the pain. And again, that cross-cutting where you see their hands, and the slow motion and the fade to black. I love that. Ever the one to multitask, Arnold Schwarzenegger is driving the motorcycle and holding onto his machine gun at the same time. Postcoital giggles. And again, like the massacre sequence earlier in the film, the Terminator is sort of given away by the barking of the German Shepherd. And we'll notice that later in the film, Sarah Connor herself purchases a German Shepherd, or acquires one somehow. A very narrow escape, of course, as the Terminator riddles the entire apartment with bullets. And you can see some of the props, too, where they've made bombs and they've strewn everything out. They've lived in it, even if only for a couple hours. I love how they threw that guy out of the car. The fourth way to steal a car, Grand Theft Auto style. You can see the damage to the bumper even. Just a tiny little detail like that, and the smoke and the barking dog. Just all these little tiny details like that that sort of leap out at you. I love that shot too, where he sort of pulls the bike out in front of the camera before driving off. And the chase is on, again, full bore. These streets look a little bit emptier than perhaps some of them, but if I had to rate, say, the two chase sequences, I definitely prefer the chase sequence earlier on in the film with the shotguns. But again, you have these actors. She's driving, he's driving, and trade places, and they're all doing this with a camera pointing at them. It's very visceral. You don't get the feeling that there's any sort of green screen because there isn't. But they do sort of speed up the footage in certain shots. I love this music too. It's like ba da 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 da. Maybe it's a little hammy, but it works with the film. Every horror film has very recognizable, over-the-top kind of music. And this is, of course, a chase sequence that James Cameron would recreate in his second film. If you look closely, you can see that is an Arnold Schwarzenegger on the bike. But the same thing happens in Terminator 2 when he does the jump. Yeah, if you look there, you can tell that's not Michael Biehn throwing the pipe bomb. But they make sure to have plenty of extreme close-ups where you can see the actual actor's face, and they kind of cross-cut it with shots of the stunt actors. So it works pretty well. Yeah, again, that's not Arnold Schwarzenegger on that bike. Though at this point, his arsenal has been reduced to this tiny little pea shooter, and I wonder what would have happened if she hadn't decided to ram him, because he would have run out of firearms, right? What's he going to do? Well, I suppose what he could have done is driven fast enough to jump into the bed of the truck, and then they would have been in trouble. I can't say I fully agree with the way that she subdued him here, because she took out her own vehicle in the process. I love this too, the cross-cutting between them, and then totally still, and then he looks at the camera, bright light, bam, he gets hit by the truck. It's interesting, because here we finally have a scene where we see that the Terminator isn't completely indestructible. He's holding on, trying to hold on. That truck did a number on him. I'm not sure who these guys are, but again, they're not recognizable. Completely unrecognizable. Just almost everyone in this movie is just an extra almost. But again, it gives the movie a very realistic feel. I love that shot. The camera again crouching, sort of following free motion behind Schwarzenegger as he climbs into the truck. I like some of these makeup effects. And again, it's just for one quick shot in the film, but I think they did a pretty good job. You can kind of tell that again, just like in Terminator 2, the eyeball extends out past Schwarzenegger's skull. Like it doesn't quite, it's fitted over his face. But overall, I think they did a pretty solid job. And again, this is Schwarzenegger driving a truck. Not that right there is obviously a stunt driver. But again, they cut back and forth between Schwarzenegger and the stunt driver, and it works fairly well. And again, this is James Cameron has a tendency to sort of revisit scenes in other movies. If you look closely, you can see the eye of the Terminator behind them. It's a good detail. And of course, the headlights of the semi are very bright, very overwhelming. Lots of lens flare. Though, oddly enough, the truck, you can see it's kind of not the most effective vehicle, and he's driving a little bit slow here. He perhaps could have chosen something a bit more nimble to chase down Sarah Connor here. I'm not entirely sure this was the best idea on Kyle Reese's part either. But you'll notice by the time the bomb goes off, Sarah Connor is pretty far away from the truck. Sort of like a rabbit being chased by a bear or a bull. There's just no way that he's going to catch her. This explosion's pretty impressive, though. A green screen effect. But then this explosion here is real. Oh, that looks so cool. Just real fire. Yeah, that's just a beautiful shot of the burning truck as it explodes. Really impressive looking, too. You can tell that there's some green screen going on there. But it's analog, which I think looks a lot different than green screen nowadays. Sort of a Frankenstein monster moment is Schwarzenegger is taken out of the picture and replaced with the metal endoskeleton that we heard about earlier. This is the unmasking of the villain, and if you watch a movie like Halloween, for instance, there's a point in that film where Michael Myers is demasked. It's the same idea here, except he is skinned alive, and we see the metal skeleton underneath. Sort of a musical ellipsis here as we're wondering quite what's going on. Like sort of what plays on Jeopardy or something like that. Da, da, da. And then the fanfare as we see Reese emerge from the smoke. Yes, lo and behold, he's okay. I like that they're so injured that they kind of have to stumble or shuffle towards each other. I think she's just exhausted. She's not really used to running. And then, of course, behind them you can see the stop motion effects at this point, I think, work better than you might think. It gives it a very robotic sort of look. The look of horror on... Reese is Michael Biehn is very expressive in this movie. And we hear her screaming in the background again. A way to expedite the scene. And then we see an extreme close-up of its eye, just like we did earlier in the film. I'm not sure what she grabs there, but something to break the window with. And at this point, she's kind of taking charge. Reese is the injured one, and she has to look after him, and there's a certain bond between them now because, well, they're in love. That's the shoulder puppet. They didn't actually have the money to do a full skeleton. And this is one of those scenes where, of course, the creature is moving inexplicably slow, and yet, or explicably slow, and yet it is inexplicably able to sort of catch up to them. Look at it. It's very kind of bleak looking, kind of scary. Some people might say, yeah, it's a special effect. It looks kind of hokey by today's standards, but compared to, say, the digital effects, the digital endoskeletons that we see in future Terminator films, I think that they look a lot better in this film with the stop motion. Or even the second film, the same idea. They just they did a bit of a better job of it in the second film, I think. Well, they had a larger budget. And again, you see all of this this factory and all of these machines. It's all very real. It's a part of the aesthetic of the 80s. Oh, now we have this moment where she sort of mans up. Great use of the puppet, too. The harsh lighting coming through the opening in the doors. Looks awesome. It's puppetry oftentimes works better. Say Yoda, or the space bug from The Fly, or the tentacles from Spider-Man 2 by Sam Raimi. Dun, 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 dun. And Sarah, of course, is toughened up at this point, and she's carrying Reese around. And this is a scene that Cameron will do note for note in Terminator 2 with the steel mill. I kind of prefer it here, though. It's bleaker. No, I do like the steel mill sequence in Terminator 2, but I'll probably do a commentary of that film, and there are certain problems that I have with that scene. It doesn't stop me from enjoying it, mind you. Excellent puppet work, though. They did a really good job with that. But again, it's just a puppet in front of a camera, which explains why they were able to do something that looks so great. And again, an ECU of its face, and then an even closer up of its eye, sort of focusing in on them. They've given away their position. Reese reaching into the scene. Even little details like the fire extinguisher, the sign on the wall, the lights to the left of the screen. Little things like that. And then you can hear I love that sound. Just the sound of the computer. Behold, the evil computer personified, about to deliver your doom. It works pretty well, too. And again, this is all delivered with puppets, but it looks so much better than it could have otherwise. Nowadays, with a Sharknado-style movie on sci-fi, they would just digitally animate everything instead of actually trying to use puppets. Filming everything, again, this movie is very low budget, but considering what they're doing here, again, just puppets, it looks really good. Sarah doesn't want to leave him at this point. Poor Kyle. Come on, motherfucker. And the music playing in unison with him banging it against it with the pipe. You think, oh, he really hit it there. Oh, no, he didn't. Nope, he's screwed. The music here is pretty chilling, I think. Kind of reminds me of Psycho or something like that, very shrill. And in his last moments, Kyle Reese is able to deliver the coup de grace and roll away. Pretty powerful looking shot there. And the creature is blown apart, and we think, again, look at that smoke, the harsh lighting, the puppetry, everything like that. Just pieces of it are everywhere. Again, smoke, harsh lighting, this movie is very visually consistent. And then, we see that Sarah Connor has been wounded. And if she's been wounded, what happened to Kyle? Nice little bit of body horror here where she has to pull out the metal. And again, this is done entirely... Again, it occurs largely off screen. She pulls the metal out, and we see, again, blood on it, but we don't see her pull it directly from her leg. It's such a great way to sort of save money. You leave things to the viewer's imagination, you use sound effects, you have things occur off screen. Also, she's crippled at this point. She can no longer run. More on that in a second. And we think, oh, has Kyle survived? They're in love. He can't die here. Right? But she rolls him over and he's dead. I like it too, because the movie doesn't have quite as much of focus on it, because before you know it, the Terminator stirs, you can see it move. Cue scary music. She's not out of the woods yet, folks. It's kind of cool too how it crawls over his dead body. She has to try and escape. And the Terminator is of course crippled at this point, but it still has one hand. More than enough to strangle her if it catches her. And again, what we have here is, again, a chase between cripples. Which sounds a little silly, but I think it works fairly well. She can't run, it can't run, but there's a very good chance that it can catch her. She's on a conveyor belt at this point, which helps her get away, but it also delivers her chaser towards her. And they're crawling under machines. Over machines, it's very visual. All she can do at this point is try and crawl away. It's a great scene, it's very tense. And this time I think it doesn't seem like the creature's moving too quickly. It's moving about as fast as she is. Some good sound effects as it's it's moving along. I love the sound effects in this film. The score at this point kind of reminds me of Forbidden Planet. It's not very musical. It's almost, again, electronic tonalities. But there's a crescendo, a rising, and she just barely has time to slam down the grate. And the Terminator's reaching for her, and he seems to have her right where it wants her. Oh, nope. It's inside a hydraulic press, and all she has to do is push the button. She could have pushed the wrong button, though. Wouldn't that be ignominious? Classic line, "You're terminated, fucker." The Terminator's like, oh shit. And then we finally see the killing blow delivered as the Terminator is squished as flat as a pancake. With a real hydraulic press, I might add. Pretty effective technique. If you look at its hip joint, you can see that it's been smushed flat. But its arm still exists. So does the chip. The crying heroine, just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Laurie Strode in Halloween. Poor Kyle. Sort of a bittersweet ending, but not totally unrequited. As Sarah says in the second film, those few hours we spent together we loved a lifetime's worth. I love this cut too. They shut the doors, cuts to black immediately, and then it fades to Sarah Connor driving to Mexico, I think. And of course, she's recording all of this on cassette tapes with a cassette tape recorder. And not too long ago, I was using cassette tape recorders like this when I was in college. I had a guitar class, and this is the kind of technology that we would use to record things. We see, of course, an extreme close-up of the revolver, the German Shepherd in the back of her Jeep. She has gained her autonomy or power at this point, but she's lost the man that she loves. It's kind of sad. You'll see Renegade on the side of her Jeep. As far as I understand it, they actually didn't have the license to shoot at this particular gas station. It's actually a pretty famous spot in Hollywood. You see it in a lot of different movies. At least I read that once. I don't know if that's entirely true, but yeah, when they this movie is very Coca-Cola oriented. If you look all around, you see Coca-Cola everywhere. Well, it pays the bills. And you see the slow close-up, getting closer and closer as she's monologuing, essentially. That faraway, sad look the boy captures very shortly on his Polaroid camera. Yeah, I love this. I loved a lifetime's worth. Oh, brother, I can relate to that. Of course, at this point in the story, she doesn't speak Spanish yet. So she has to ask the helpful gas station attendant, what did he say? And we see this is where she gets the Polaroid photo that eventually Kyle Reese is able to come into possession with in the future. Though Polaroid photos actually fade, I can't imagine that they would be able to preserve it adequately. Over the course of 40 years, how well would a Polaroid photo actually hold up? Probably well enough, I suppose. I know. You have that sad sounding music that sort of segues into my favorite version of the Terminator theme. She drives away into the storm. It just sounds badass. I love that. Something almost suspicious looking about that. Like she's driving away into like a matte painting. Acknowledgement to the works of Harlan Ellison. Evidently James Cameron borrowed a lot of ideas. When I say borrowed, I meant very liberally stole ideas from Harlan Ellison, who was a writer of The Outer Limits. I guess he thought that maybe it was such a low-budget film that they would have no way of telling that, hey, he ripped off Harlan Ellison. Harlan wasn't evidently very happy about that. They had to reach a settlement outside of court, I think, in regards to that. Anyways, guys, my commentary for the Terminator. It's been a little while since I watched this film, but man, is it a classic. It's just such a good movie. It's James Cameron's best film, and it has a lot of talent working on it too. Some of the best work done by some of the actors. I mean, honestly, I consider this to be Michael Baine's best work. Lance Henriksen, one of his better, smaller roles. Most of his roles are generally pretty minuscule, except for maybe a starring role in Pumpkinhead, which was directed by Stan Winston, who oddly enough did the special effects in this film. Great use of low-budget special effects, puppetry, editing. Everything in this movie is absolutely wonderful. And just an excellent start to James Cameron's career, and something that I think he never really did perfectly ever again. Terminator 2 is pretty solid, but look at the number of people that did the Terminator special effects. Maybe 10, 12 people, tops. Just special visual effects, Fantasy 2 Film Effects Incorporated. Terminator stop motion was performed by one individual. Just the number of people that worked on this film is practically no one. I wish that they would make movies like that nowadays. But this movie was very shoestring. It almost didn't get made. It's a miracle it got made. But it was made with elbow grease, guts, and passion. There's just a lot to it it's really solid. Easily one of my favorite films of all time. But I'm a sucker for the Terminator movies. I even like the bad ones, like Salvation or Genesis. And let's see if they have the future soldier, the unnamed soldier. They don't. Uncredited is probably it could be one of the stunt actors, maybe Suzanne Fish, but they don't actually credit the extra casting coordinator. This movie had a shitload of extras. So many people that don't actually get credited in this film. It's a shame, because I'm always curious, who is that person? Who is that other person? Most of these people I have to wonder if they were even actors. Anyways, guys, I'm going to cut the commentary short here. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, yeah, before I do, though, Triangles. Ricky Phillips. As far as I understand it, Terry King and the Triangles, they were a band that was put together just for this film. So I love that. I love the music by them. Very 80s, obviously. But anyways, I'm going to cut the commentary short here. If you liked it, like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned. I'll probably do more of these. This is actually quite a bit of fun. But until next time, thanks for watching, guys, and take care.